Well, we've been talking a lot about freedom of expression in France, but of course it's an issue everywhere around the world. The second weekly flogging of a Saudi blogger was postponed today. Amnesty International says a doctor determined that he was not healed, Raif Badawi, not healed enough from last week's lashing. Raif Badawi was sentenced to a total of 1,000 lashes and 10 years in prison for the crime of insulting Islam. Last Friday, he received the first 50 lashes. The punishment has sparked international outrage, and one of Badawi's friends says the delay is encouraging today.
According to her, I mean, she has said, and other people have been in touch with him. I haven't been in touch with him recently at all. They've said that he is not in very good medical condition, especially after the flogging last week. So, I mean, the way this happens is that you have the wounds, and then the next week you have those wounds, and on top of that you get lashed again, and this happens every week. So it's obviously, as anybody can imagine, I mean, that's not an easy thing to go through. It's a difficult thing to withstand.
Well, Badawi's wife said she expects the flogging to continue next Friday. Let's get more on what this delay could mean and also the international outrage. Salil Shetty is the Secretary General of Amnesty International, and he joins me now live from London. What do you make of the delay?
Well, I think it's really rather bizarre, because what is being proposed is that there has to be a delay in order for Raif Badawi to heal so they can actually flog him again. All that Raif did was to encourage public debate by setting up a social blogging website. He's an Amnesty International prisoner of conscience. He should be released. He has 3 young children and a wife in Canada. Flogging is a complete violation of international law under any circumstance, and the Saudi government simply gets away with human rights violations because they're very close to many Western countries. In fact, the paradox was that last week they were actually condemning the Charlie Hebdo attacks on one day, and the next day they were flogging Raif Badawi. So it's really a paradox.
So has Amnesty International been in touch with Saudi authorities, and if so, what's being said?
Well, the Saudi authorities are not necessarily in the habit of listening to anybody, because they seem to have the protection and support of Western governments who are their allies. So it's not just Raif Badawi, but they have been involved with tens of public beheadings just in the last several months or so. They've also, the imprisonment of the lawyer of Raif Badawi, Walid, has also been announced just 5 days ago. It's been confirmed. The sentence has been upheld. So they simply get away with it. Our activists, millions of members across the world, are going to put pressure. The US government unusually has actually asked the Saudi government to take action, and Canadian and German governments are also calling for it. But historically, they have complete license. They repress freedom of expression, associate all the fundamental freedoms, and get away with it. So I think it's really high time that there's international pressure on the Saudi government.
Do you think that these Western countries that you say are allies of Saudi Arabia are not doing enough in this and other cases? Do you think that the finger of blame should be pointed in their direction as well?
I mean, there's no question about it, because if the same thing had happened, say, in Iran or in a country which is seen as hostile to Western governments, then there would be a much greater outcry. It's not the first time that flogging has happened in Saudi Arabia. There's even public beheadings which happen on a regular basis, but Saudi Arabia gets away with it. So on the one hand, they claim to be fighting against terrorism. On the other hand, they're violating human rights themselves. So I think it's a very good time to remind ourselves that we can't have double standards.
And Salil Shetty, just one last question. Do you think that public outrage and, in fact, publicizing this case helps Raif Badawi's case? Do you think that putting pressure on authorities can work?
I think Amnesty International is a campaigning and advocacy organization. We believe that this does make a difference. Of course, it is the reality in Saudi Arabia that if the Saudi government continues to behave in this way, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a lot of pressure which domestically grows as well. So it's not only a question of international pressure. I think they're going to face more and more pressure from inside. And partly their reaction to Raif Badawi actually sort of discloses that they're beginning to feel the pressure domestically. So they're coming down so heavily on human rights defenders like Raif and like Walid, his lawyer.
Salil Shetty, the Secretary General of Amnesty International, thanks very much for joining us from London on this Raif Badawi case in Saudi Arabia.